because that's actually what we carry. God should remember that he had promised not to allow calamity to come right there. 10 or thousands on both sides can fall. So with our eyes we shall behold, it will not come nigh us. It will not come nigh our dwelling places. We quote these things, but I don't know whether we are experiencing those things. I ask questions a lot when I read God's word. I challenge God's word. It's good for me to read the Bible, read the story, enjoy the story, get revelation. I keep asking, so what will be written about me? What will be read about me? Does it end there? Or is there any mortal man through whom the Lord can occasion these events so that it becomes real to people and they will no longer doubt the authenticity of God's word in our time? These are issues on my mind. So I like to say again that because we are talking about manifestation of the sons of God, it is a sign that God is quite important, and I'm going to deal with it further as we go. So you'll find out that things that are important, like marriage, like contract, or when you make purchases of something important, you have documentation of such things, and you try to preserve it. You've been to university peradventure. There is no way for us to know you have gone to university, but you have a certificate. That's a manifestation. So when you go for interview, that's what you present to show that you have passed through university and you are qualified for the job you are applying for. Without it, they will say there's no manifestation. Even if you perform so brilliantly in the test, they will still say, look, you don't have certificates. So we need something physical for us to believe there is something internal. If you cannot, you know the rumblings in the last general election of the issue of certificates of our president and commander-in-chief of the armed forces. You know how much heat that generated because of the issue of certificate. And the school of thought of some people is that, look, even if he's qualified and this is not there, then he's not qualified. I don't want to talk about how it is settled. No, there are legal luminaries here, so I must respect them. But you see, that's one of the issues that I wish we would get to today as we go on. In our last retreat, we were looking at Harvest of Glory, and I was taking them through the book of Isaiah, chapter 60, trying to walk them, and Psalm 8, trying to walk them through the field for them to see the details of the field and what is waiting for us to harvest. And we know what we suffer in this part of the world, because such field, like judiciary, has not been harvested. Or there hasn't been manifestation of the sons of God in years as it is required. And that's where we are going this morning. So it is important that things that are critical, marriage, contracts, purchases, in order for us to keep their memory fresh, in order for us to maintain the authenticity of ownership, documents are made and kept as tokens, as manifestations, as signs or demonstration to keep such events alive. So, for me, manifestation is not just a sign, is a reminder. And I'm going to, if the Lord helps me, push that in a small way as we go on. Manifestation immortalizes an event or an object or a person. You just have, there are marks on my face, when I had an accident in 1986 on Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. And God miraculously rescued me. At that point, I had bidden faith, farewell, and I told myself I should pursue money. And that morning, I was traveling to Ghana to go and buy gold, raw gold. And I had 600 naira in my pocket as I was traveling. That was a lot of money then, kind of. I took this vehicle at Challenge, a 504 station wagon, and I sat beside the window. And just before the interchange, there was a tire burst, and the car rolled over. And because I was sitting beside the window, I don't know how it happened. Half of my body was out of the car, and half was under the car. So the car practically stopped on my back. It's unimaginable. So those who came to rescue, they were rescuing the people in the car. They thought this one is gone, so don't let us bother about this. Let's rescue those who are still talking. And so they were rescuing the people in the car. And suddenly I came back alive, and I wanted to stand up. I noticed something was spinning me down, and I screamed. That was why they lifted the car off my back, and they dragged me out. Fortunately for me, there was a senior of mine from the secondary school who was in the car with me. I met him after many years that we have left school, and I've not seen him since that time. It was the angel the Lord sent. He didn't have any injury. He just sat me on the ground, rested my back on his leg, lay hands on me, and began to prophesy. He was prophesying profusely. And under his hand, I repented. I said, Lord, I know if I die here, I will go to hell straight. I'm coming back home. I've not seen him since that day. We were rushed to the hospital. And I think on the 7th day, I stood up. Nobody knew I would walk. How I didn't have spinal cord injury, I don't know. God knew that I was going to use this back to preach, so he preserved it. So every time I look at the mirror and I saw marks on my face, I remember the accident, and I tell myself, your salvation is costly. Don't lose it. Don't lose it. I was a backslider before the Lord rescued me again. So you may not know why somehow I am hard in some areas of life. It is because of such experiences. That token, that token reminds me, that manifestation reminds me of what and how God rescued me. And for that, I was not going to mess it up. So, manifestation does not only remind, it immortalizes. I remember that accident every time, and it's still fresh. Every time I drive on that road and I get to that spot, I will remind myself, I say, it was this spot. When I'll be going today again, I'll remind myself, I said, this spot. I've never passed that spot without telling myself, it was here. It was here. I gave my life to Christ in 1977, where we called First Square Camp now. It used to be youth camp in those days. It was Mama Kachin, an American missionary that owned that camp in Ibadan and in Ilorin. And it was in that place in 1977. In July, we were having long vacation. We were taken to that place, and that's how I heard the gospel. That's how I gave my life to Christ. Occasionally, when I come to some critical junction in my life, I will go back to that spot. And I will kneel and say, God, the journey started here. Right here, this journey started. It's a manifestation. It's a sign, it's an emblem that reminds me of how I started my journey with God. Now, I'm saying all of this because I want you to understand that it becomes difficult, we lose history, or heaven loses history when there are no manifestations on earth. There's a complete disconnect between what the saints of old, the early disciples of Jesus, presented to us and what we have now. Because at a point, there seemed to be a loss of manifestation that could keep that history alive. And I'm wondering what the coming generation will meet if something is not done now. So thank God, thank you, sir, for receiving this for us, sir. That God has come this early part of this year to emphasize the issue of manifestations of the sons of God. Sons of God. Not just children of God. It's not a big problem to be a child. Abraham said to the Lord, you see me going childless? And this Eliezer of Damascus is the steward of my house. So it's not a big problem. But the problem is that when there are no children, strangers become stewards in the house of God. When God did not respond to him, he came back and said, Lord, to me you have given no seed. And this Eliezer of Damascus, the one born in my house, will be my heir. That's when God responded. To be a steward, God kept quiet. Since he's still a child, and it's about stewardship, maybe you can manage that. But for heirship, and it's not a seed, will respond. God said, this will not be your heir. So we can tolerate stewards who are not children taking care. Maybe we can. But that's still not God's way of looking at things. But when it comes to inheriting God's power, taking charge of God's inheritance, no, it must be such a person who carries the DNA of the Almighty within him. And so, I am thinking in my mind that when we don't have manifestation, whatever it is that we want to immortalize, whatever it is we want to make fresh in our memory, will be forgotten, and as a matter of fact, you will never even think it ever happened in history. So manifestation speaks to the past, speaks to the present, and speaks to the future. We may never be able to know what God has done in the past without having his sons around. And we may never be able to bring him into the present situation and project him into the future and have a guarantee that we're going to have that experience in the future when there are no sons of God on the ground. Let me, in a very small way, talk about why should manifestation be physical and not spiritual or invisible? Because God himself is invisible, God himself is spirit. So why shouldn't we think that this manifestation should be spiritual or possibly invisible, and we shouldn't be thinking of it manifestly manifest, such that we can see it, we can relate with it or to it the way you like it, such that you can sometimes touch, you can hold, you can handle, you can look upon, as John the Beloved put it in 1 John chapter 1. But you see, as I check through the scriptures, and I'm not sure I will bore you with a number of such scriptures today, except when pressed, I realized that just as we saw it yesterday in the case of the rainbow, that it was not only visible, it was also on display. I wish it shouldn't go through all of that. But that's what God did. The only one I came to look at in the Bible that was visible but not on display was circumcision. It was also a manifestation of the covenant between God and Abraham that has become ours today by the faith in Christ Jesus. Visible, yet not on display, because of the part that was involved. And so in the New Testament, we talk about the circumcision of the heart. That also is invisible, but it's on display by the character of men who are circumcised. Am I making sense? All right. So I feel in my heart that while we look at the manifestation of the sons of God, and not as something that we cannot relate with, or something that we need microscope for us to detect it, I like to say to you that if it's a correct manifestation, it must be visible and it must be on display. I'll be speaking to that as I move on. So, we're talking this day about manifestation of the sons of God. So if I say it's not manifestation of God, I'll be confusing you, because you know that Omejo, Ejoni. Am I making sense to you? Omejo, Kini, Ejoni. You don't say because serpent is small, you should allow it to bite you. Even if it's just coming out of the egg, of the shell of the egg, it's as lethal as the adult. Deadly, if not deadlier. However, God, his life, and his lifestyle are three critical areas in which, if I have such liberty, I will love to discuss. But take it as a capsule. God desires that this will be perpetuated on earth. And I wish I could speak to it a little, and I will try as I'm going on. I know very well that, every time people ask me questions about tithes, I'm not a pastor. So people ask me questions about tithes. Sometimes they want to use me against pastors. And they say, well, it's Old Testament. It doesn't have basis in the New Testament and all of that. And if I notice that the person actually desires to know the truth, I'll say, but tithe is neither Old Testament nor New Testament. It's an eternal truth in the Word of God that is started from the Garden of Eden. Even when there was nothing like Moses or Levi. And then they opened their eyes to look at me. Say, how? I said, but you see, very simply, because tithe is tribute. Yoruba calls it ishakole. It's a token. It's a manifestation. A way to show that you are not the owner of a farm. So if Brother OJ gave me his farm to use, and I plant oil palm there, I will agree with him that every year I'll bring ishakole to him to register the fact that that land belongs to him and not to me. It could be a bottle of oil. It could have thousands of liters of palm oil every year. But that one bottle must not fail. The day it fails, that's an affront. I have challenged him. I have made myself the owner of that land. He comes to take over the entire land. So when God said, all the trees in this garden you can eat, but this is my ishakole. You must not eat it. So what is that? That's tithe. To show that Adam was not the sole owner of that garden. So I asked them, where did Abraham learn tithe from when he gave it to Melchizedek? There was no law at that time. There was no religion. There was no Old Testament at that time. That man walked by faith. Why did Melchizedek collect it? He received it by faith as well. So I go to show them a point where the Gibeonites raped the wife of the Levite to death. And that man cut his wife into 12 pieces and distributed it throughout the 12 tribes of Israel. And the people were enraged against the Gibeonites. And some volunteers came and said, we are not going to go back to our businesses. We're not going to go back home. We're going to go and fight these people and remove this dirty thing from Israel. And then they said, all right, since we have these volunteers to go and fight this national battle for us, 10 of every 100 must bring victual for them so that they will not be distracted. It was not Levites now. It wasn't Levites. It's a token. Thank you, sir. It's a token. So each time you hold it, you are saying God has no stake in your life. You are the sole owner of your life. You are playing with what is dangerous. I'm not a pastor, and Brashola didn't send me. I'm only telling you what is in the Bible. So anybody who tells you it's Old Testament, forget Old Testament, forget New Testament. This is a principle that has been there to support, to pay salary, and to show that God, those are the three critical points, to show that God is the owner. He's the owner of my life. So when money comes into my hand, I remove the tithes. I don't pay it into Potter's house so that I will not have access to it. I send it to my disciple maker. Am I still making sense? Am I still your friend? Say tight city pọ̀ jù báwo ni máa ṣe san odidi 1 million. But kò pọ̀ jù láti gba 10 million àbí? Beautiful nonsense. Excellent rubbish. So, every time we do not present such token, it is an affront. It's as though we are poking at God's eyes. We are daring God. Unfortunately, today and in today's church, we are growing men who are not tokens. We are growing fans who are loyal to us. And we are denying God the token. By that, as leaders, we are saying he is not the owner of the church that we are. Those who raised us, and I think that was what your wife was saying yesterday. Those who raised us didn't raise us to become their property. They raised us to become Christ's property. We went everywhere, and we are still going everywhere, not talking about ourselves, but him who saved us. And for all pastors who are here, all leaders of the Church of Christ, anywhere, at whatever level, I'd like to say to you that he never asked us to go and make members of our denomination. He asked us to go and make disciples. His disciples. Everywhere. Because he must not be forgotten here on earth. Because he must be perpetuated as the owner of the church. It is part of what brought about the issue of the Lord's Supper. He took the bread and he took the wine. Said, this is my flesh that is broken for you. And this is the blood of the New Testament. Every time you do this in remembrance of me, you announce the Lord's death till he comes. Now, I looked at that. Two critical issues. Number one, you remember me. And the word remember, I do not look at it from the angle of just remembrance. In memory of. Yes, that's part of it. But the word remember, it is as remember. Making him member afresh. Adding him to ourselves as part of ourselves, and adding ourselves to him as part of his body. So every time you take the bread and the wine, you are simply making him member. And you are making yourself member of his body. Not doing it means you have forgotten him, irrespective of the messages you preach on the pulpit. Am I making sense? When I was pastoring, we do Holy Communion every Sunday. Because I told the brethren, I said, so he said, as often as you do this. So for me, there is no law that says I should do it once in 6 months. It's every Sunday before we leave, we'll take bread and wine. We want to remember. Apart from remembering, we want to make him part of this journey afresh. Part of this ministry afresh. Part of our decisions afresh. Part of our actions afresh. By that, you can't forget him. By that, he is with you. Because his body and his blood is part and parcel of you, and you are part and parcel of him. Am I communicating? So it becomes a challenge, therefore, when there is no strong representation of God via his sons on earth. These are what are my troubles about this matter. We bring God into a state of being defrauded. We defraud him of his property. And this cost him his blood. So the question I ask is, how can we be that bold? How can we be that bold to deny him that which belongs to him? That him rather say, how can I profit by his blood? How? And why should I profit by his blood? What will give me such effrontery to look at the blood and the sacrifices that Christ made on the cross, and I will just throw my hand into it and pick it up and make it mine? No, it's not done that way. Welcome, God's servants. It's not done that way. It is very important, therefore, for all of us to know that while we talk about manifestation, we are also talking about a way, a system that God put in place so that it can be remembered. And the ownership, his ownership of his church will not be questioned by anybody. I went to preach in Agoiwe a few weeks ago. And because my father's church, there's a branch there in Agoiwe. I remember that spot. It was a shrine, a dreaded shrine in Agoiwe. Nobody wanted to go there. My father said they should give it to him. And there I went to build a church hall. And the hall is still there. So as I was leaving the town, I passed through the place. I saw the service was still on, so I branched. They were having Holy Communion service. So I sat down to take the Holy Communion with them. And then they have to introduce me. And then they said, we are pleased to introduce to you the son of the founder of this church. Now, anybody who does not know me there, start to respect me. Just by hearing that I am the son of the founder. Sitting among the ministers, they are not known there, made some people to squint and say, who is this one? But when they heard that he's the son of the founder, oh, they relaxed and they smiled that I deserve that seat. My father had problems with some of his lieutenants before he died. And he suspended some of them. I was interpreting for him that day. And they were unable to resolve the issues, and they were dying one by one. So one day I picked my pen and I wrote to the leadership of my father's church, and I wrote to the other church, New Creation Gospel Church. It's a mighty church today. They are here. So I wrote to the two of them. I wrote to one, follow peace with all men. I wrote to the other one, even if you have a gift and you have come to the altar and you notice that somebody has something, leave your gift and go and settle. And God was gracious to me. Both parties we were ready to listen to me. And so I bridged them together under God, settled the trouble. And so they were to install the new general overseer of my father's church, and I was the guest speaker. And those that my father suspended were in the meeting, who came from New Creation Church. And I stood on the pulpit. I was the one who interpreted for him the day he was suspending them. When he was saying it in Yoruba, I refused to say it in English. And that was the reason New Creation leadership said they would listen to him, because they saw me that day that I was not partisan. So on the pulpit that I was preaching, I said, I was here and it was on this pulpit my father suspended so and so. I don't want to mention the name, so and so, so and so, so and so. I am the son of him. His blood runs in my vein. Today, I reversed that suspension. Nobody could challenge it. I don't know whether we carry that authority anymore in the church representing Jehovah. So when he said, whatsoever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, I wonder what kind of risk is that? He said, hereafter you shall see angels ascending and descending upon the Son of Man, not descending and ascending. Ascending and descending. So the point of departure is earth. Upon the Son of Man, Jacob saw a ladder. But Jesus said that ladder was me. Hereafter you will see heaven open and you will see angels ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. So the access to heaven is the Son of Man. Nimrod, I thought, caught that revelation and he didn't see it very well. He tried to build a tower that will reach heaven. I said it's not a tower, it's a ladder. A tower is immobile, but ladder is mobile. You will labor and you will never get there. It's a token, it's a manifestation. It's an object, it's our wedding ring by which we prove our relationship with God. When it is not there, it's not there. We are left in the limbo, completely confused. We'll only be making mouths and nothing will happen. Excuse me. How many minutes do I have more? You know me, I'm just talking. Reverend is here, who will bring God's word to us. Okay. It becomes critical, therefore, and I want to say this to you, that in Nigeria today we are talking about devolution of power. We feel that the power is too concentrated at the center. But God has that in place. By sons and their manifestation is a devolution of power. The power will not be concentrated in heaven. So it is whatever you allow on earth, the heavens allows. And whatever you disallow on earth, heaven will disallow it. And I am not thinking. Pastor Ola was sharing an experience yesterday that tore my heart, of the sister you met as you were doing your prayer work. You were interceding for her. She was living differently. So we pray for the church, we pray for Nigeria, but we are living differently. So the prayers are unanswered. Not because God's ears are heavy, not because his hands are shortened, but because there is a wedge, there is a mighty gulf between us and him. And that's the challenge of our age. So I want to bring you, these few placement of tokens just for you to understand what God is we be expecting from you, beginning from this meeting, within the few minutes that I have, and then we can pray if we have that space, or when our father in the faith, Reverend George, comes on, I don't need it. I don't need it. Farmer sweats on the farm, and soldier sweat on the line. A preacher sweat on the pulpit. It's just okay, because it will disturb the microphone, disturb my Bible. Very soon we'll put AC here, so it becomes very good. Yes. Praise the Lord. Can we look at Genesis chapter 21? That will probably be the only scripture. I don't know whether I will be able to raise two other scriptures within the next 10 minutes. Genesis 21, verses 28 to 30. Let me read from verse 27, okay? And Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them unto Abimelech, and both of them made a covenant. And Abraham set 7 lambs of the flock by themselves. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, what mean these 7 lambs which thou hast set by themselves? And he said, for these 7 lambs shalt thou take of my hand, that they may be a witness unto me that I have digged this well. Wherefore he called that place Beersheba, because there they swear, both of them. I won't be able to go into the details of this story itself because of time, and I'm sure it's not any way unfamiliar passage to all of us. And again, because we are servants of God, we are preachers of the gospel, so I know these are scriptures you've handled, many times. However, it's important for me to remind you that there have been contention over wells, and wells to the patriarch is critical. One, it's a sign that life is there and that environment can support life. So once they get to an environment, the first thing they do is to sink a well. If they can't find water, then life is not there. Number 2, they use well as their search engine. Just like we have Google today, well was their search engine. Anything they are looking for, they just go to the well. I'm sure you remember that when Eliezer, Ayazu, the servant of Abraham, was to get a wife for Abraham's son, he went to the well. That's how he found Rebekah. Jacob also came to the well in the field. That's how he met Rachel and eventually Laban. I'm very sure that you know that when Moses was looking for his bearing, as he came to Midian, he located a well. That's how he located Jethro, and he was able to find his path in life. I'm too sure also you remember very well that even for Jesus, looking for how to enter Samaria, how to sit on a well, and that's how he got an entrance into Samaria. So it's a search engine for the men of old. And so there have been contention, and they have wrested some of the wells that Abraham sunk from him. But this time around, they were trying to agree, and then they made a covenant. Abraham brought flocks and gave to Abimelech. But he set about 7 lambs aside. And Abimelech asked him, so what's the meaning of this? He said, so that you will take this from my hand, this special animal will be growing among the rest. And since they are different, as they are growing among the rest, you will be remembering that I am the owner of this well. So while I look at placement of tokens, manifestations, objects, of covenant that we're supposed to be, God is not interested in, permit me, in having the whole world becoming his sons, even though that is good. It's not, but if you just have few of us scattered at different points, for the earth to remember and to know that God owns this place, and this place does not belong to the devil, that will have been all right. But now it looks as though the devil is the owner of this earth. Go to any ministry, government ministry, you will think the devil possessed the place. Go into politics, say it's a dirty game because the devil has possessed the place. Communication, the devil is in possession. Banking and finance, the devil is in possession. Go to the police, the devil is in possession. Anywhere, all institutions. And the question I keep asking is the devil that rich? Why is it that everywhere is there? Nothing else, so it's just because we have manifestations of his sons there. There is nothing wrong with politics. If not God, if not my wife, I would have been a politician. My wife had to beg God, especially that God should take politics out of my heart. I love politics like anything. Maybe they will have killed myself. But I like to say to you, friends, as I round off, that the placement of this token that we are looking at demands that we should be scattered in all fields of life, in all life endeavors. I don't know whether it was here or somewhere. I was making that case that, look, it's becoming difficult because we keep producing men after ourselves. As a preacher, I would like somebody who is preaching like me and who is living like me. But I've come to know that as preachers, we can't handle this problem. Elijah could not handle Jezebel. Elisha could not handle him. It took a Jehu to handle him. We need a king, not a prophet, to handle men like Jezebel. And so we need to raise men in the marketplace, professionals, who will be sons of God manifesting in the marketplaces. Look, when last have I gone to a bank? Do I have the time? You work there. When last have I gone to a market? You are there. How many of us are seated at the minister's seat? We are very few compared with the large number in the congregation. You are there. You are the one that could take the gospel to the far lands, to places where ministers may not be able to reach. And it becomes difficult when we lack these elams among the flock that will show that God sunk this well and not the devil. The devil is not the owner of gold and silver. He is not. God made them. And I refuse to accept. I said there's nothing wrong with money. I don't teach money, I don't preach it. But there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with musical instruments. It is the person that is operating it that has something that is wrong with it. Is there not yet a prophet of the Lord from whom we may inquire? Ahab said there is yet one man. That's what we are looking for. Rise to your feet. Or Pastor, is it just to come? All right, let's rise. I can't go on because I thought I'll be here yesterday to listen to God's servant. And privileged that he's here live and direct today to speak to us. So I can swallow what I wanted to say so that he can come around to bring God's oracle to us. The challenge in my heart is this how we'll continue? That you are a Christian and the sign of sonship is not revealing you. You drive recklessly like other downfall drivers. You embezzle money in your office like any other person. In the school, you teach. You are the owner of the school. You teach students how to cheat. And you are complaining somebody forged certificates in Aso Rock. You are complaining INEC is exchanging figures and they are shutting down IREF portals when you are shutting down the one in your school. The record you flaunt for us to see is not the true test of the ability of your student, and you are a Christian. I'm ashamed. Manifestation cannot be spirit. Thank God for online. Thank God for our virtual brethren who are connected with us. We celebrate you. But you see, while that cannot stop anymore, it has come to stay. We have to realize, boy, we are not holding meeting of spirits. Are we holding meeting of spirits? We are mortal beings. We are touchable. You can't breastfeed children online. Pastor, abi technology yẹn ti wà ní. You can't give birth online. You have to travail to bring forth the child. And I'd like to ask you, so when will you announce that God owns this place and not the devil in your space? Can you make a commitment to God on your own? I take my seat.
Now it's a commitment you're making. It's a commitment you're making. I'll take us through a prayer point, but make the commitment an allegiance yourself. Lord, I choose to announce you where I am, my field, my profession, my career. I choose to announce you. I choose to make you known there. I receive grace to walk in the understanding of my purpose in my field of career or business. I receive grace to walk in the understanding of my calling in my office, in my career, manifesting Christ even over there. In Jesus' name we pray.